Amid the luxury of a silent mansion, a girl covered in mud changes everything with a single proposal. What seemed like an unlikely encounter turns into something no one ever expected. The garage of Henry Montgomery's mansion in Brentwood, the most exclusive neighborhood of Los Angeles, was larger than many car dealerships. 50 luxury automobiles, each worth a small fortune, rested under automatic lights that turned on when someone entered. Rarely did anyone enter. The owner of that empire of metal and Italian leather preferred the solitude of his office, where spreadsheet numbers replaced the conversations he had avoided for years. That June afternoon, the California sky wept a fine, persistent rain. Winter in Los Angeles had this peculiar characteristic, not the intense cold of the north, but a humid melancholy that penetrated the bones and soul. Henry observed the drops running down the panoramic window. At 54, his graying temples and the creases around his eyes told stories that his mouth refused to pronounce. "You need to sign these documents, Mr. Montgomery." Anthony, his personal assistant for more than a decade, entered without making noise as usual. Henry didn't respond immediately, his eyes still fixed on the rain. "They're the contracts for the expansion to the northeast," Anthony continued, already accustomed to his boss's silences. "Leave them there." Henry pointed to the glass table. His voice was deep but lifeless, as if words were merely necessary tools, not genuine expressions. When Anthony left, Henry returned to his contemplation. Montgomery Logistics had become one of the largest companies in the country under his command. It transported goods throughout. America connected borders, moved the economy. Meanwhile, its president remained motionless, trapped between the empty present and a past he couldn't forget. He rose with a sigh. His footsteps echoed through the marble corridor that connected the wings of the mansion. He stopped before a closed door. It had been 3 years since he'd opened it. Lucy's room, his daughter, remained untouched since she and Melissa, his wife, had left, not because they had departed this world, but because they had chosen another path, away from him, away from his obsessions, away from the coldness that had been growing inside him like a silent cancer. The housekeeper, Mrs. Martha, observed him discreetly from the end of the corridor. She knew that routine. The boss standing before the door, his hand raised as if to touch the doorknob but never touching, his shoulders fallen in defeat. The return to the office or to the garage, his 2 refuges. "Will you have dinner in your office again, sir?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Yes, Martha. Thank you." He descended the stairs toward the underground garage. There, among the cars that had once represented achievements and today seemed only frozen memories, Henry found a strange comfort. He no longer drove most of them. He merely observed them, like museum pieces. The silver Porsche 911, a gift he had given himself when he closed his first $1 million contract. The red Ferrari he bought the day the company went public on the stock exchange. The classic Jaguar he restored over months, in the rare hours when he wasn't working. Each vehicle had a story, each one a chapter of a life that now seemed to belong to someone else. John, the trusted caretaker who had looked after the property for years, was checking the drainage system near the garage gate when he noticed an unusual movement. At first he thought it was just an animal seeking shelter from the rain, but when he approached, he saw it was a child, a small girl, soaked, standing before the gate like an apparition. "Little girl, what are you doing?" "There, are you lost?" She didn't respond immediately. Her big brown eyes were fixed on the automobiles visible through the partially open gate. "I want to talk to the owner," she finally said, her voice surprisingly firm for someone so small and wet. "That's not how things work, my child. The boss doesn't receive anyone without an appointment, and he certainly doesn't receive soaked children appearing out of nowhere. Please." There was no supplication in her voice. It was a direct request, almost an order. "It's important." John hesitated. On any other day, he would have been firm in sending the girl away. But something in those determined eyes made him pick up the radio and call the main house. "Mrs. Martha, there's a child here at the garage gate wanting to speak with the boss." The response came quickly and predictably. "Send her away, John. You know Mr. Montgomery doesn't receive anyone." "I know, but—" He looked at the girl again, the curly hair stuck to her face, the oversized wet clothes. the eyes that showed no fear. "I think the sir should see this." In the main house, Mrs. Martha sighed at the caretaker's insistence. She knew John was a sensible man. If he was breaking protocol, he had his reasons. She decided to risk it and knocked on the door of Henry's office. "Mr. Montgomery, forgive the interruption. John is on the radio. He says there's a child at the garage gate insisting on speaking with you." Henry raised his eyes from the documents he was pretending to read. "A child?" "Yes, sir, a girl. John seems to think you should see her." For some reason he didn't understand himself. Henry stood up. Perhaps it was boredom, or perhaps a curiosity. He hadn't felt in a long time. He went down to the garage by the internal staircase, putting on the imported shoes he rarely wore inside the house. The rain had increased when he reached the gate. Outside, standing like a statue, was the girl. She didn't seem to be more than 8 or 9 years old. She wore clothes too simple for the neighborhood where she found herself. She wasn't crying. She wasn't trembling. She just waited, with a disconcerting dignity. "Who are you?" asked Henry, his voice coming out harsher than he intended. "Amy," she answered simply. "And what do you want, Amy?" The girl looked beyond him, to the cars lined up in the illuminated garage. Then she turned her determined eyes to the man's face and said, without beating around the bush, "I'll wash all your 50 cars for food." Henry was speechless. It wasn't a request for charity, it was a business proposal, coming from a child who would barely reach the hood of the vehicles. "How do you know I have 50 cars?" "Everyone knows. The rich man in Brentwood has 50 cars that nobody ever sees on the street." There was something in that child's frankness that caught him off guard. It wasn't desperation he saw in those eyes. It was determination, dignity, something he himself had lost a long time ago. "Come in," he said, surprising himself and John, who was observing the scene with amazement. Amy crossed the gate without hesitation, as if that were the answer she had expected from the beginning. Her steps left small puddles on the polished floor of the garage. She stopped next to the silver Porsche, admiring her distorted reflection in the impeccable bodywork. "Why do you need food? Where are your parents?" "My mum is sick. She can't. I worked for 3 weeks now. The money ran out. My dad—" She paused. "I don't have a dad." Henry felt something strange in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. Empathy, compassion, or just the recognition of an inverted mirror, a child fighting to survive, while he, with all his money, had given up on living. 50 cars is a lot of work for someone your size, he said, trying to sound casual, hiding the unexpected emotion this encounter was provoking. Amy shrugged. "I can start with the smallest ones." A smile almost escaped Henry's lips. Almost. "Come," he said, indicating the stairs. "Let's sort this out inside. It's raining too much to talk here." As he guided the small, soaked visitor through the corridors of his silent mansion, Henry didn't notice that for the first time in years his steps had a purpose beyond mere existence. He also didn't notice Mrs. Martha's surprised look when she saw him with an unknown child, nor did he hear John's sigh of relief over the radio. On that grey winter afternoon in Los Angeles, something was about to change in Henry Montgomery's life. Something that 50 luxury cars couldn't do, awaken a heart numbed by pain and guilt. Mrs. Martha wasn't quite sure what to do with the small visitor sitting at the kitchen table. In 30 years working in wealthy family homes, she had never seen Mr. Montgomery bring someone like this, without warning. Especially a rain-soaked child, with simple clothes and hair that formed a halo of disheveled curls around her face. "Eat. Slowly, child. The food isn't going to run away," said the housekeeper, watching Amy devour the plate of spaghetti and meatballs as if it were her last meal. The girl slowed her pace, but didn't take her eyes off the plate. Henry observed the scene from the kitchen door, an indecipherable expression on his face. There was something hypnotic about that child's determination, something that reminded him of himself many years ago, before the money, before the mansion, before the pain. "Where do you live, Amy?" he asked, finally entering the kitchen and sitting at the table, something he hadn't done in years. The kitchen was Mrs. Martha's domain and that of the other staff. "Westmont," she replied, between one forkful and another. "With my mum." Henry and Mrs. Martha exchanged glances. Westmont was a few miles away in distance, but light years away in social reality. It was one of the various poor neighborhoods that grew on the fringes of wealthy Los Angeles, where families fought daily for survival. How did you get here? Walking. Alone? In this rain? Amy shrugged, as if the journey were nothing special. I've done harder things. Henry felt a pang in his chest. A child shouldn't say something like that with such naturalness. And does your mother know you're here? For the first time, Amy hesitated. She lowered her fork and looked at her own hands. No, she's sleeping. The fever came back strong today. I didn't want to wake her. Fever? Mrs. Martha approached, genuine concern on her face. How long has she been like this, my child? It started almost a month ago. She got a little better last week, even went back to working cleaning houses, but then she got worse again. Today she couldn't get up. Henry remained silent, absorbing the information. A sick woman, without adequate medical assistance. A child, assuming adult responsibilities. A work proposal in exchange for food. It wasn't an uncommon picture in America, he knew that, but seeing it materialized in the form of that girl sitting at his table was different from reading statistics in reports. When you finish eating, I'll take you home, he said, surprising himself again. And we'll see how your mother is. Amy's eyes widened. You'll take me by car? Yes. The rain isn't going to stop any time soon. In which one? There was a spark of childish excitement in her voice, the first she had shown since. Arriving, Henry almost smiled. Almost. You can choose. In the garage, Amy walked slowly among the automobiles, as if she were in a museum. Her fingers didn't touch the bodywork, an instinctive respect for others' property. Finally, she stopped before a black SUV, the least flashy of the collection. This one, she said. It's big and won't attract attention in Westmont. Henry realized it wasn't excitement about the adventure of riding in a luxury car. It was pragmatism, protection. The girl thought like an adult, calculating risks and consequences. The journey was silent. Amy gave directions with precision, without wasting words. As they moved away from Brentwood, the landscape changed drastically. The high walls and well-tended gardens gave way to improvised constructions, narrow streets, power lines intertwined like spider webs. The rain transformed everything into a blurred watercolor of gray and brown. There, Amy pointed to an alley, where the car barely passed. It's the last house. House was a generous euphemism. It was a shack of exposed bricks with a zinc roof. The door was a plywood board, covered by a piece of plastic to prevent the rain from entering. There was no doorbell. Amy simply pushed the improvised door and entered, signaling for Henry to follow her. The interior was clean despite the evident poverty. A single room served as living room, kitchen, and bedroom. In the corner, on a mattress on the floor, a woman slept restlessly, covered by a thin sheet. Her face was an adult version of Amy's, the same delicate features, the same curly hair, now stuck to her forehead by the sweat of fever. "Mom," called Amy softly, touching the woman's arm. "I brought help." Rachel opened her eyes slowly, as if the simple act required a monumental effort. When she saw Henry standing there, she tried to get up with a start. "Who are you? What are you doing in my house?" Her voice was weak, but the protective instinct was strong. "Calm down, Mum. This is the car man. I went there to ask for work and he gave me food. Now he came to help us." Henry felt the weight of Rachel's feverish gaze. Distrust, wounded pride, and fear mixed in those eyes. "We don't need charity," said Rachel, trying to sit up. A violent cough prevented her, making her double over. "I didn't come to offer charity," responded Henry, maintaining a respectful distance. "Your daughter offered me a service. I'm considering the proposal." Rachel looked at Amy, who nodded, confirming the story. What kind of service can an 8-year-old child offer? The distrust in Rachel's voice was palpable. "Washing cars," responded Amy before Henry could speak. "He has 50. Rachel closed her eyes, too exhausted to argue. "You're not going to wash any car, Amy. We've talked about this. When I get better, I'll go back to work and—" Another bout of coughing interrupted her, more violent than the previous one. This time, Henry noticed the handkerchief she brought. To her mouth came a way stained with red. "You need a doctor," he said, taking a step forward. "Now." "I don't have money for a private doctor, and the clinic only has an appointment a month from now," responded Rachel, her breathing difficult. "I have a doctor friend. He can see you today." "Why?" Rachel's question came out like a challenge. Why would a rich man who never saw us before care? Henry didn't have a ready answer. Why did he care? Why had he let that child enter his house? Why was he here, in this shack, offering help to strangers? "Because your daughter had the courage to knock on my door," he finally answered, "and because no one should be like this, without assistance." Rachel studied the man's face for a long moment, as if looking for signs of deception or ulterior motives. Finally, she nodded slightly. She had no choice. The fever was too high, the cough worsened each day, and her daughter was already doing the unthinkable, seeking help from strangers to save her. Dr. Paul Andrews answered Henry's call without asking questions. Years of friendship gave him that privilege. He arrived at the private clinic in downtown Los Angeles 20 minutes after Henry, Rachel, and Amy. His professional expression revealed no surprise at seeing his reclusive friend accompanied by a clearly ill woman and her small daughter. "We need complete tests," said Henry while the doctor examined Rachel. "Costs on me." Paul nodded, leading Rachel to the examination room. Amy wanted to accompany her mother, but the nurse gently prevented her, explaining that she needed to stay in the waiting room. Seated side by side in the chairs of the empty reception, Henry had asked for discretion, and Paul ensured that no one else would be attended to at that time. Businessman and child waited in silence, a silence that strangely wasn't uncomfortable. "Your mother will be fine," said Henry, breaking the silence after a few minutes. "Dr. Paul is the best pulmonologist in the city." Amy nodded, her eyes fixed on the door through which her mother had disappeared. "Are you married?" she asked suddenly, catching Henry by surprise. "No, not anymore." "Do you have children?" Henry felt the familiar pang of pain. "A daughter." "Where is she?" "Far away, with her mother." Amy absorbed the information without commenting. Her eyes now studied the man beside her, as if trying to solve a complex puzzle. "Is that why you have 50 cars and a huge house but seem sad?" The question hit Henry like a punch to the stomach. How could a child who barely knew him see what many adults around him didn't perceive? Before he could answer, Dr. Paul returned to the reception. His face was serious. "Henry, can we talk? In private?" "No," interrupted Amy, standing up. "If it's about my mother, I want to hear." Paul looked at Henry, who nodded slightly. "She has the right to know." The doctor sighed. "Rachel has bacterial pneumonia in an advanced stage. The infection has spread beyond what would be expected. We suspect her immune system was already compromised before, probably due to malnutrition and overwork. She needs immediate hospitalization, potent antibiotics, and constant monitoring." "Will she get better?" Amy's voice was small now, reminding everyone that despite her maturity, she was still just a frightened child. "With the proper treatment, yes," responded the doctor, looking her in the eyes honestly. "But it will take time, weeks perhaps." "And where will she stay during that time?" asked Henry. "I recommend hospitalization right here. We have the necessary resources, and I can personally monitor her." Henry nodded. "Arrange everything." "The best room, the best team." Amy looked at him, a silent question in her eyes. "And what about me?" she finally asked. "Where will I stay while my mother is here?" Henry hadn't thought about that. A part of him, the rational business part that calculated risks and benefits, said that his responsibility ended there with the medical treatment provided. He could contact Child Protective Services, find temporary shelter, make a generous donation. But another part, one that had been dormant for so long that he barely recognized it, spoke louder. "You can stay at my house," he said, surprising himself for the third time that day. "Until your mother fully recovers." Paul raised his eyebrows but didn't comment. He knew his friend well enough to know that such an offer wasn't made lightly. Amy studied Henry's face for a long moment, as if she could read his soul. Then, with the same dignity with which she had made her initial proposal, she extended her small hand for a formal handshake. "I accept, but I still want to wash some of your cars as payment." Henry accepted the extended hand, feeling something strange stir in his chest. It wasn't pity, it wasn't charity, it was respect, and perhaps the first whisper of a connection that would change his life forever. Amy's presence in the mansion transformed the silent routine into something completely new. The first days were marked by a cautious adaptation on both sides. The girl observed everything with attentive eyes, measuring each step, rarely touching objects without permission. Henry, in turn, maintained a respectful distance, as if fearing that any approach could break the fragile balance established. Mrs. Martha became the bridge between the two. With her decades of experience caring for families, the housekeeper knew exactly how to make Amy feel welcomed without seeming invasive. "Do you like to draw, my child?" she asked one morning, noticing how the girl observed the paintings on the walls. Amy nodded shyly. "I'll arrange some papers and colored pencils for you. Mr. Montgomery doesn't even use that small office at the end of the corridor. It can be your little corner while you're here." That's how Amy gained her first own space in the mansion, a desk by the window with a view of the backyard garden, equipped with drawing materials that Mrs. Martha found in the supply cabinet. In truth, the housekeeper had asked Anthony to buy everything new, especially for the girl, but thought it better not to make a fuss about it. Henry noticed the change in the dynamics of the house. The corridors, previously filled only with the echo of his own footsteps, now occasionally captured the sound of small feet moving carefully, the scraping of pencils on paper, even, in rare moments, a contained laugh when Mrs. Martha told some story during the afternoon snack. On the third day, he stopped at the door of the small office and observed in silence. Amy was concentrated on her drawing, her tongue slightly out in a sign of absolute concentration. She didn't immediately notice his presence. "What are you drawing?" he finally asked. Amy startled slightly, then relaxed upon recognizing him. "Your cars," she responded, turning the paper so he could see. They weren't technically precise representations. After all, she was only 8 years old. But there was something remarkably authentic in the way she captured the essence of each vehicle. The silver Porsche, the red Ferrari, the classic Jaguar, each had its own personality on the paper. "You have talent," he commented, genuinely impressed. Amy shrugged, but a small smile betrayed her pride. "My teacher used to say that, before I stopped going to school." "Why did you stop?" "I needed to help my mom when she started getting sick. Someone had to take care of the house and do the shopping while she worked." She said this without self-pity, just stating facts. Henry felt that now familiar pang in his chest. A child shouldn't have to choose between education and survival. "Did you like school?" "Very much." Her eyes shone with the memory. "Especially art and science classes. I wanted to be a doctor someday. You still can be." Amy looked at him with a mixture of hope and distrust. "Do you really think so?" "I'm certain," he responded, surprising himself with his own conviction. "When your mother gets better, we'll find a good school for you to go back to." The smile he received in response was the first genuinely broad one since Amy had arrived at the mansion. It was like seeing the sun emerge after a long storm. That night, Henry didn't dine in his office as usual. For the first time in years, he sat at the dining room table. Amy seemed tiny in the large chair, but her posture was dignified. Mrs. Martha served the meal with a satisfied gleam in her eyes. "How is your mother?" asked Henry, breaking the initial silence. "Dr. Paul said she's responding well to the medicine. The fever has gone down." Amy cut the meat carefully, using the utensils with the precision of someone who was well taught. "Today she was awake when I visited. She asked if I was being a bother." "And are you?" The girl looked at him seriously. "I'm trying not to be. I make my bed every day and put away my drawings." "I wasn't talking about that," clarified Henry. "So you're not a bother. In fact," he hesitated, searching for the right words. "In fact, it's good to have someone besides the staff in this big house. Amy nodded, absorbing the information. Why do you live alone in a house that could fit 20 people? The direct question, without filters, was typical of her. Henry considered deflecting the subject, as he always did when someone touched on his personal life, but something in the sincerity of those childish eyes made him respond with equal honesty. It wasn't always like this. Before I had a family, my wife, Melissa, and my daughter, Lucy. They left? Yes. Why? Henry took a deep breath. How to explain to a child that he had lost himself in work, in ambitions, in cars, in material conquests, until he became a stranger to his own family? I forgot what was really important, he finally said. I worked too much. I was always busy. One day when I finally looked around, they were no longer there. Amy considered the answer with the seriousness of a judge evaluating a complex case. Did you try to apologize? Many times. The pain in his voice was palpable. But some things, once broken, are difficult to fix. My mum says nothing is impossible to fix if you really want to. Henry smiled sadly. Your mother seems to be a wise woman. She is. Amy took a sip of juice. And stubborn too, like me. After dinner, instead of retiring to the office as usual, Henry invited Amy to get to know the garage more calmly. The girl's eyes shone at the proposal. The illuminated garage seemed even more impressive at night. The cars gleamed under the automatic lights, like sleeping animals waiting to come to life. Can I get in one of them? Asked Amy, her voice almost a whisper, as if she were in a cathedral. Of course. She chose the silver Porsche again. She seemed to have developed a special affection for that model. Henry opened the door and she slid into the driver's seat, her legs far from reaching the pedals. What's it like to drive a car like this? It's exciting, he responded, realizing how long it had been since he had really felt that emotion. The sensation of freedom, of being able to go anywhere. Do you go to many places? Not anymore, he admitted. These cars rarely leave the garage now. Amy ran her fingers over the leather steering wheel. It's sad to have beautiful things that nobody uses. The observation, so simple and direct, hit Henry with unexpected force. It wasn't just about the cars. It was about his life, his mansion, his fortune. Everything was there, untouched, without purpose, like a museum of empty achievements. You're right, he agreed, leaning on the car door. It's very sad. In the days that followed, a routine began to establish itself. In the morning, after breakfast, Anthony would take Amy to visit Rachel in the hospital. The girl would spend a few hours with her mother, telling her about her days in the mansion, showing her drawings, bringing small gifts made by herself, colorful cards, origami learned from tutorials that Mrs. Martha found on the internet, even a portrait of Dr. Paul that made the doctor blush with pride. In the afternoon, to the surprise of all the staff, Henry began to reduce his workload. He cancelled non-essential meetings, delegated tasks he had previously insisted on doing personally, refused trips that could be conducted by video conference. Instead, he spent a few hours with Amy, sometimes just sitting in the same environment, while she drew and he read reports, other times talking about the books she found in the mansion's library. Have you read all of these? She asked one day, impressed with the quantity of volumes on the shelves that went from floor to ceiling. Not all, he admitted. Some were bought more for decoration than for reading. That's a waste, declared Amy, with her usual frankness. Books are for reading. Henry smiled. You're right. How about we choose some to read together? That's how the evenings in the mansion gained a new ritual. After dinner, instead of the usual silence, the living room echoed with Henry's voice. Reading stories. They began with children's classics he found in a forgotten box, books that had once belonged to Lucy, and soon advanced to more complex adventures that challenged Amy's curious mind. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Rachel showed consistent signs of improvement. The pneumonia was yielding to the antibiotics, her breathing no longer needed oxygen assistance, and the doctors were talking about transferring her to a normal room soon. Your mother is a fighter, commented Dr. Paul during a visit where he found Henry in the corridor. I rarely see someone recover so quickly from an infection at that level. Like Amy, responded Henry. Determination seems to be a family trait. Paul observed his friend with interest. In 20 years of friendship, he had never seen him so present, as if something that had been dormant for a long time finally awakened. And how is it for you? Having a child in the house after so long? Henry thought before responding. It's invigorating and frightening. Frightening? Amy makes me remember things I've spent years trying to forget. She asks questions I don't know how to answer. She sees through the walls I've built, he paused, and at the same time she makes me want to be better. Paul smiled. Children have that effect, especially intelligent ones like her. That same day, upon returning to the mansion, Henry found Amy sitting on the main staircase, hugging her knees. Her normally composed face was marked by recent tears. What happened? He asked, kneeling to be at her height. Amy hesitated, fighting against more tears. I received a message from the neighbor who's looking after our things in Westmont. Henry waited, giving her space to continue. A man showed up there today, asking about me and my mom. Her voice trembled slightly. It was my dad. The revelation caught Henry by surprise. Your dad? I said I didn't have a dad because he left when I was 5, explained Amy. We never saw him again. He didn't send money or call nothing. And now he's back? Amy nodded, wiping her eyes with the backs of her hands. The neighbor said he'll be back tomorrow, said he needs to find us. Henry felt a wave of protection he hadn't experienced in years. Do you want to see him? The girl shook her head negatively. I'm afraid of what he might want. My mom always got nervous when we talked about him. She said he was... She searched for the right word. Complicated. Henry sat beside her on the stairs, maintaining a respectful distance but offering presence. Amy, as long as you and your mother are under my protection, nothing bad will happen to you. I promise. The girl looked at him with those eyes that seemed to see far beyond words. Why? Why are you doing all this for us? It was a question that Henry himself had been asking. Why did he care so much about that child and her mother? Why, after years of voluntary isolation, had he opened not only his house but also parts of himself that he thought were forever lost? Because, he began, seeking the honesty that Amy always offered him, because you reminded me that there are still important things beyond work and money. You gave me a purpose when I didn't have one. Amy absorbed his words in silence. Then, in a gesture that caught Henry completely off guard, she leaned in and rested her head on his shoulder. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. That. Tight for the first time in years, Henry stopped again before the closed door of Lucy's room. This time his hand didn't hesitate on the doorknob. He opened the door and entered. The room was exactly as his daughter had left it. The posters of teenage bands on the walls, the collection of teddy bears on the shelf, the desk with school notebooks carefully stacked, a life interrupted, preserved as if in amber. Henry sat on the edge of the bed and allowed the memories to come not as a devastating torrent as before, but as a calm river that finally finds its natural course. I think I'm finally learning, Lucy, he whispered to the empty room. A little late, perhaps, but I'm learning. When he left the room, he left the door ajar. It was a small gesture, but it symbolized a lot. The past no longer needed to be locked away. It could coexist with the present, with the future. And at that moment, as unlikely as it seemed, Henry Montgomery began to believe that perhaps there was a future beyond the guilt and loneliness he had imposed on himself. Rachel observed the landscape through the car window with a mixture of gratitude and discomfort. After 3 weeks of hospitalization, she had finally been discharged, and now she was heading towards Henry Montgomery's mansion in the back seat of a Mercedes driven by himself. In the seat beside her, Amy could barely contain her excitement, pointing out landmarks and chattering about everything her mother needed to know about the house. And the small office became my art corner, Mom. Mrs. Martha arranged everything for me, and there's a giant library with more books than the entire school, and the garage. Amy, interrupted Rachel softly, give Mr. Montgomery time to breathe. You've been talking non-stop since we left the hospital. Henry smiled in the rearview mirror. I don't mind. It's good to see that enthusiasm. Rachel was still pale, thinner than she should be, but her eyes had regained the determined gleam that Amy had inherited. During her daughter's daily visits to the hospital, she had followed with growing admiration and suspicion the development of that unlikely situation. Her daughter living in the mansion of one of the richest men in Los Angeles, being treated not as a charity case, but as someone who deserved to be there. Mr. Montgomery, she began, adjusting herself in the seat, I'll never be able to thank you enough for everything you've done for us, but I need you to know that I'm not comfortable abusing your generosity any further. As soon as I'm fully recovered, we'll go back to our house and— Rachel, Henry gently interrupted, can we discuss this after you're settled and rested? Dr. Paul was very specific about the need for rest and a suitable environment for your complete recovery. Amy looked at her mother with pleading eyes. Please, Mom, just until you're really better. Rachel sighed, momentarily surrendering. All right, but we need to talk seriously about this, Mr. Montgomery. Henry, he corrected. Please call. Henry. When they arrived at the mansion, Rachel couldn't hide her amazement. Even having heard her daughter's enthusiastic descriptions, nothing had prepared her for the reality of that place. The imposing entrance, the meticulously cared for gardens, the underground garage where dozens of luxury cars rested like jewels in a treasure box. It's impressive, was all she managed to say. It's just a house too big for one person, responded Henry with simplicity. Come, let's show you where you'll stay. To Rachel's surprise, they didn't enter the main house. Instead, Henry drove the car along a side path that led to the back of the property, where a smaller but still elegant building rose among flowering trees. This is the guest house, he explained, parking. I thought you'd prefer to have your own space with more privacy. The guest house was larger than any place Rachel had ever lived. 2 spacious bedrooms, living room, equipped kitchen, even a small veranda with a view of a rose bed. Everything. Impeccably clean and tastefully decorated, without unnecessary ostentation. It's perfect, murmured Amy, running to explore. Rachel remained standing at the entrance, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. Gratitude, shame, relief, fear of the future, all mixed in a tight knot in her chest. I know it's a lot to process, said Henry, noting her discomfort. But please, consider this a temporary space for your recovery. No commitments, no expectations. Rachel nodded, unable to form words. Henry understood her need for space. I'll leave you to yourselves. Mrs. Martha prepared a light meal that's in the refrigerator. If you need anything, just call. When he left, Rachel finally allowed herself to sit, her legs trembling slightly. Amy appeared from the bedroom, a radiant smile on her face. Isn't it incredible, Mom? Look, there's even a desk in my room for me to draw. Rachel opened her arms, and her daughter ran to her embrace. She held her tight, breathing in the familiar smell of her hair, now perfumed with shampoo of a quality superior to what she had ever been able to provide. Amy, she said softly, we need to talk about this situation. About Mr. Montgomery. Henry? The girl moved away a little, looking at her mother seriously. He's good, Mum, really. He's sad inside, but he's good. How can you be so sure? We barely know him. Amy shrugged with that intuitive wisdom that sometimes made Rachel forget she was talking to an 8-year-old child. I know. The same way I knew we could trust Dr. Paul, or the same way I knew that Mrs. Doris from the bakery always gave us old bread even when charging for fresh. Rachel couldn't avoid a small smile. Her daughter's sharp intuition rarely failed. Even so, honey, we can't depend on the kindness of strangers forever. As soon as I'm strong enough, I'll look for work and— Why don't you work here? Interrupted Amy. I heard Mrs. Martha say she wants to retire. She takes care of everything in the house. Rachel frowned. Amy, you shouldn't eavesdrop on others' conversations. I wasn't eavesdropping. She was talking to John when I passed by the garden. She paused. And she said it would be good to have someone younger to take over the responsibilities. You could do that, Mom. You're organized and know how to take care of houses. Rachel considered the idea for a moment. Working as a housekeeper in a mansion like that wasn't something she had ever imagined for herself. But it was an honest job, which could provide stability for her and Amy while they reorganized. "I'll think about it," she promised, "but now I need to rest a little." In the days that followed, Rachel gradually adapted to the new routine. Her strength returned little by little, allowing increasingly longer walks through the garden. Amy divided her time between the guest house and the main mansion, where she continued her reading and drawing sessions with Henry. On a particularly pleasant afternoon, Rachel found herself with Henry on the veranda of the main house. He was reviewing some documents but put them away as soon as he saw her approach. "How are you feeling today?" he asked, offering a chair. "Better each day," responded Rachel, sitting down. Henry, I need to talk about our situation." He nodded, waiting for her to continue. "Your generosity saved us. Literally. I'll never be able to thank you enough." She paused, gathering courage. "But I can't accept more than I've already accepted without offering something in return." I don't need to." "Yes, I do," interrupted Rachel firmly. "For myself, for my dignity, and for the example I set for my daughter." Henry studied her determined face and understood that it wouldn't help to argue. "What do you propose?" "Amy mentioned that your housekeeper is thinking about retiring. I have experience in domestic administration. I worked in several family homes before." She hesitated. "Before our situation became complicated, I can take over her responsibilities, if you give me the opportunity." Henry considered the proposal. Mrs. Martha indeed had been talking about retirement for months. At 67, she deserved rest after decades of loyal service. "It would be a convenient solution for everyone," continued Rachel. "Amy could continue her studies at a nearby school. I would have a dignified job, and you wouldn't lose your housekeeper." "And you would continue in the guest house?" "If that's acceptable, we would pay rent, of course." Henry shook his head. "The house comes with the job, no rent." Rachel opened, her mouth to protest, but he raised a hand. "This isn't charity, Rachel. It's a standard professional arrangement. Ask any housekeeper of a property this size." After a moment of hesitation, Rachel nodded. "In that case, I accept your offer. When Mrs. Martha is ready to pass the baton, I'll be ready to take it." They sealed the agreement with a formal handshake. There was a new respect in the eyes of both, a mutual understanding between two people who, despite differences in origin and circumstances, shared fundamental values of work and dignity. The next morning, as Rachel was having coffee on the veranda of the guest house watching Amy explore the garden, John appeared with a worried expression. "Ms. Rachel, there's a man at the gate asking for you and the girl." Rachel instantly paled. "What does he look like?" "Tall, thin, short hair. Said he's Amy's father." The fear Rachel felt was so intense that for a moment she thought her illness had returned. "Carl. After 3 years without news, without help, without a single word, he appeared precisely now." "Tell him we're not here," she responded, her voice trembling. John hesitated. "He seems determined, Miss Rachel. He said he knows you're here, that he has informants at the hospital." Rachel closed her eyes for a moment, trying to control the growing panic. She couldn't allow Carl to disturb the new stability they were building. She knew her ex-partner too well. If he had returned after so long, it was because he wanted something. "I'll talk to him," she decided. "But don't let Amy see him, please." John nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation without needing detailed explanations. "I'll take the girl to see the puppies that the neighbor's dog had. She's been talking about it for days." Rachel thanked him with a look and headed towards the main gate. Each step seemed to cost an enormous effort, as if she were walking against a powerful current. Carl was there, leaning on a worn motorcycle, nervously smoking. At 35, he looked much older, his face marked by poorly slept nights' deep dark circles, the restless posture of someone who lives constantly alert. When he saw Rachel approaching, he smiled that smile that had once won her over, but now only caused her apprehension. "Rachel, my God, you look different. Thinner." "What do you want, Carl?" she asked directly, remaining on the inside of the gate. He seemed offended. Is that how you receive the father of your daughter after so long? No hug, no how are you? You lost the right to hugs and gentle questions when you disappeared without leaving an address for 3 years. Carl took a last drag on his cigarette and threw it on the ground, crushing it with his boot. I had my reasons. Life wasn't easy. For anyone, responded Rachel coldly. I repeat, what do you want? The smile disappeared from his face. I want to see my daughter. I have the right. Right? Rachel almost laughed. What right does a man have who abandoned a 5-year-old child without looking back? Who never sent a cent to feed her? Who didn't even call on her birthday? Carl ran his hand through his thinning hair, a nervous gesture that Rachel knew well. Look, I know I made mistakes, but I'm here now. I want to make up for lost time. Why? Why now, Carl? What changed? He looked away, and Rachel knew there was something more. Carl had never been good at hiding his true intentions. I heard you're living with a rich guy, he finally said. The owner of Montgomery Logistics. How did you manage that, huh? You were always smart. The implicit insult made Rachel's blood boil. It's none of your business, and if you came after money, you can turn around right now. Carl approached the gate more, his face now hard, the mask of sympathy completely abandoned. Listen well, Rachel. I am Amy's father. Legally, I have rights. If you don't want me to create problems, we'll have to negotiate. Negotiate what? Exactly. Help to restart my life. His eyes shone with poorly disguised greed. Your new billionaire friend certainly won't miss a few thousand, or tens of thousands. Rachel felt her stomach turn with disgust. Are you blackmailing me? Using our daughter as a bargaining chip? I'm being practical. I have information that your boss wouldn't like to see spread around. A single rich man sheltering a single woman with a small daughter. Imagine the rumors. Before Rachel could respond, a deep and firm voice sounded behind her. Any problem, Rachel? Henry had approached silently, alerted by John about the unwanted visitor. His normally reserved face now displayed an expression of cold determination. Carl instinctively backed away, clearly not expecting to confront the mansion's owner personally. Mr. Montgomery, he stammered, immediately changing his tone. Very pleased. I'm Carl Williams, Amy's father. I just came to visit my daughter, as is my right. Henry positioned himself beside Rachel, his body slightly in front of hers in a protective posture. I heard part of your conversation, Mr. Williams, enough to understand your true intentions. Carl tried to regain his composure. There was a misunderstanding. Don't insult our intelligence, cut off Henry. I'll be direct. Rachel and Amy are under my protection now. Any attempt to disturb or blackmail them will have serious consequences. Are you threatening me? Carl tried to appear indignant, but his nervousness was evident. I'm stating facts, like the fact that abandoning a child for years constitutes parental desertion, or the fact that I have a legal team at my disposal that would love to help Rachel obtain exclusive custody officially. Henry made a calculated pause. Or even the fact that my company has operations throughout the country, which makes it easy to discover if someone has pending debts or problems with the law in other states. Carl's face visibly paled. Henry realized that his supposition was correct. The man probably had legal problems pending somewhere. I didn't come to cause problems, Carl backed down. I just wanted to see my daughter. If your interest is genuine, responded Henry, maintaining a calm but firm tone, we can discuss supervised visits after a psychological evaluation to ensure that the contact will be beneficial for Amy. Carl looked from Henry to Rachel, realizing that his extortion attempt had completely failed. He mounted the motorcycle with abrupt movements. This isn't over, he muttered, before starting up and accelerating down the street. Rachel released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her legs were trembling so much that she needed to lean on the gate. Thank you, she whispered. He was always manipulative, but I've never seen him so desperate. Henry placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Will he come back? Probably. Carl doesn't give up easily when he believes he can gain something. In that case, we need to be prepared. Henry paused. Rachel, I know you value your independence and I respect that, but at this moment, let me help. I have resources that can legally protect you and Amy. Rachel nodded slowly. Years of solitary struggle had taught her to trust only herself. But now, for the first time in a long time, she felt that she didn't need to face everything alone. Amy. Can't know about this, she said. At least not yet. She has confused memories of her father, some good, others frightening. I don't want to disturb the stability she has finally found. I agree. We'll deal with Carl in the most discreet way possible. As they walked back to the house side by side, a new understanding was established between them. It wasn't just a professional agreement now. It was an alliance to protect what both, for different reasons, valued most, Amy's well-being. And, somewhere deep down, something else began to bloom. A feeling that neither was ready to name but that pulsed softly, like a promise of better days to come. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching us from. We continue. The morning was clear, with that golden light that only a California winter can produce, when Henry parked his most discreet car, a black Volvo sedan, in front of the law office in downtown Los Angeles. Rachel, seated in the passenger seat, nervously adjusted the folder with documents on her lap. Are you sure you want to do this now? Asked Henry, noticing her anxiety. Absolutely, she responded, looking through the window at the elegant building. Carl has appeared 3 times in 2 weeks, each visit more aggressive than the previous one. We need to resolve this once and for all. Since the first confrontation at the gate, Carl had returned with growing demands and increasingly less veiled threats. On the last visit, he had even mentioned that he could simply take Amy from school, since he still legally had paternal rights. It was the last straw for Rachel. Inside the office, they were received by Dr. Beatrice Morgan, a lawyer specialized in family law, known for her competence and discretion, qualities that Henry valued above all. Welcome, greeted the lawyer, a middle-aged woman with perceptive eyes and a confident posture. Mr. Montgomery, Ms. Williams, please sit down. As Rachel explained the situation, Carl's abandonment, his sudden return apparently motivated by financial interests, the veiled threats, Dr. Beatrice took detailed notes, occasionally asking questions to clarify specific points. And do you have any formal document about Amy's custody? She asked after hearing the whole story. Rachel shook her head. When Carl left, we didn't have the financial means for a legal process. He simply disappeared. I didn't even think he would return. I understand. Dr. Beatrice reflected for a moment. The good news is that abandonment for a prolonged period greatly strengthens your case for exclusive custody. The bad news is that, without a previous formal agreement, Carl technically still has parental rights. What can we do? Asked Henry, leaning slightly forward. The lawyer considered the options. I see 2 paths. The first is to file for exclusive custody based on paternal abandonment, and show that his return represents a threat to the child's well-being. It's effective, but can be time-consuming and potentially traumatic for Amy, who would need to go through psychological evaluations. Rachel trembled at the idea of subjecting her daughter to this process. And the second path? Negotiate an extrajudicial agreement with Carl, where he formally renounces parental rights in exchange for some compensation. Dr. Beatrice paused. It would be quicker and less traumatic for everyone, especially for Amy, but it requires that he be willing to negotiate. Henry and Rachel exchanged glances. Both knew what Carl wanted. He would accept, said Rachel, with certainty. The question is, can I live with myself knowing that I essentially bought my daughter's freedom? Dr. Beatrice leaned over the table, her eyes gentle but firm. Rachel, don't think of it as buying your daughter. Think of it as compensation for the time he should have contributed financially and didn't. In many cases like yours, the court would determine retroactive child support. We're just avoiding a long and potentially painful process. Rachel took a deep breath, considering the lawyer's words. And if he accepts the money and then comes back asking for more? The agreement will be legally bulletproof. We'll include clauses that prevent any future claim, guaranteed Dr. Beatrice. He will receive the agreed value at once in exchange for total and irrevocable renunciation of parental rights. After more discussion, they decided to proceed with the option of the extrajudicial agreement. Dr. Beatrice would prepare the documents, and Carl would be invited for a formal meeting in her office, an environment that, by itself, would already make clear the seriousness of the situation. On the way back to the mansion, Rachel remained silent, looking out the window while the city passed in colorful blurs. Henry respected her space until she finally spoke. "You shouldn't be paying for this." "Rachel, no, Henry, listen to me." She turned to face him. "You've already done more for us than anyone has ever done. You funded the medical treatment that saved my life. You gave a safe home to my daughter when I couldn't. You offered me a dignified job. And now you're financing a legal process to protect us. This is too much." Henry kept his eyes on the road, but his voice was laden with contained emotion. "It's not too much, not for me." "Why?" The question was simple, but carried an enormous weight. For a moment, Henry considered giving the safe answer. Talk about social responsibility, about doing the right thing, about his financial capacity that made all of this insignificant to his patrimony. But something in Rachel's vulnerability at that moment demanded greater honesty. "Because you brought life back to my existence," he finally said. "Before Amy appeared in my garage, I was just existing, waking up, working, sleeping, repeating the cycle infinitely without real purpose." He paused. "She reminded me that there were still things that mattered. And you showed me what real strength is. Not the strength that comes from money or power, but that which comes from within. The one that makes a mother face the entire world for her daughter, even when sick, even alone." Rachel absorbed his words in silence, too moved to respond immediately. "So, don't think of it as charity," continued Henry. "Think of it as reciprocity. You gave me something that no money can buy. Let me give back in the way I can." When they arrived at the mansion, they found Amy in the garden with Mrs. Martha, helping to plant new flowers in a bed. Upon seeing them, the girl dropped the small gardening spade and ran in their direction, her face illuminated by a smile. "You took so long," she exclaimed, hugging her mother, and then, to everyone's surprise, hugging Henry as well. It was the first time she had taken that initiative. "Come see what we're planting." As Amy pulled them through the garden, chattering about seeds and flowers, Rachel and Henry exchanged a silent look of understanding. Any sacrifice was worth it to preserve that joy. 3 days later, Carl appeared at Dr. Beatrice's office for the scheduled meeting. He arrived with his usual defensive posture, but the formal environment and the presence of Henry, whom Rachel had insisted on keeping out of the meeting, clearly intimidated him. The lawyer was direct in presenting the options. A long, judicial process where his history of abandonment would be meticulously exposed, or an immediate agreement that would guarantee him a generous financial compensation in exchange for renouncing parental rights. "How much?" was Carl's first question after hearing the proposal. Dr. Beatrice mentioned a value that made his eyes widen, enough to pay off debts, restart life elsewhere, perhaps even open a small business if he were prudent. But there were conditions. "The value will be deposited in a special account," explained the lawyer. "Half at the moment of signing the documents, half 6 months later, provided that you maintain the agreed distance and don't attempt any unauthorized contact with Rachel or Amy." Carl feigned indignation. "Are you implying that I wouldn't keep my word?" "I'm establishing legal protections for both parties," responded Dr. Beatrice without being fazed. "It's standard practice." After some negotiation about specific values and terms, Carl finally agreed. The documents were signed, notarized, and the agreement sealed. Upon leaving the office, Carl cast a last look at Rachel, a look she couldn't completely decipher. Regret? Relief? Or just the satisfaction of having gotten what he wanted? It no longer mattered. For the first time in years, Rachel felt a huge weight leave her shoulders. Amy was legally protected. The ghost of Carl no longer hovered over their future. Back at the mansion, Rachel found Henry in the garden, observing from afar Amy, who was playing with two other little friends who had been brought for a visit, children of Montgomery Logistics employees who lived nearby. It was the first time the girl had received friends, a sign that she was beginning to put down roots in her new life. "It's done," said Rachel, stopping beside him. "Carl signed everything." Henry nodded, visibly relieved. "Will he comply with the agreement?" "I believe so." Money was what he really wanted. Rachel paused. "You know what's strange? I felt a kind of pity for him." "Pity?" "Yes. Carl always dreamed big, always wanted the easy life. And now at 35 he's accepting money to give up his own daughter." She shook her head. What kind of emptiness must exist inside a person to reach that point? Henry looked at the horizon, reflecting. "We all have emptiness inside us, Rachel. The difference lies in how we choose to fill them." They remained side by side, watching the children play, each lost in their own thoughts. The sun was beginning to set, bathing the garden with a golden light that transformed everything into something almost magical. "What happens now?" Rachel finally asked. "What do you want to happen?" Rachel thought for a moment. "I want stability for Amy. I want her to go back to studying at a good school. I want to work and feel that I'm building something solid for our future." "And all that you can have here," said Henry softly, "if you want." Their gazes met and something silent passed between them. Not a promise, not yet, but a possibility. They a path that opened, that neither had imagined possible just a few months before. In the weeks that followed, life on the property assumed a new routine. Mrs. Martha began to officially train Rachel to take over her functions as housekeeper. At first, some older staff members showed resistance to the idea that a guest would become their supervisor, but the efficiency and respect with which Rachel conducted each task soon won over even the most skeptical. Amy was enrolled in a private school nearby. Henry's insistence that Rachel accepted after much discussion, with the condition that part of her salary would be destined for the tuition. The girl, who had always been a good student, flourished in the new educational environment. Her drawings began to gain recognition, first from teachers, then in school exhibitions. Henry, in turn, surprised everyone in his company by announcing a reduction in his workload. He delegated more responsibilities, hired new directors, began to leave the office at reasonable hours. The change was so drastic that it generated rumors in the business circles of Los Angeles. Some speculated health problems, others believed he was preparing the company for sale. The truth was much simpler. For the first time in years, Henry Montgomery had found something more valuable than work, something that made him want to be present, not just exist. One night after the dinner they now regularly shared in the main house, Henry surprised Rachel and Amy with an announcement. "I have a proposal for you," he said, with an unusual nervousness in his normally confident voice. "The guest house is comfortable, but small for an official housekeeper and her rising artist daughter." Amy raised her eyebrows, curious. Rachel tilted her head, intrigued. "I was thinking," he continued, "that perhaps you could consider moving to the main house. There are many empty rooms and—" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "And this house needs more life." Rachel felt her heart accelerate. The proposal went beyond a simple, practical arrangement. It was an invitation to something deeper, more permanent. "Would that be as appropriate?" she asked, carefully choosing her words. "Considering my position as your employee?" "Rachel," said Henry, leaning over the table, "I think we've passed the point where our relationship can be defined by terms like employee and boss. Don't you think?" Amy observed the exchange with attentive eyes, a small smile forming at the corner of her lips. "And besides that," continued Henry, "there's Lucy's room." His voice faltered slightly upon mentioning his daughter's name, something he rarely did. "It's been empty for a long time. I think she would like it to be used by someone who could appreciate it." Amy's eyes widened. She knew from fragments of conversations and perceptive observations that Henry's daughter's room was almost an untouched sanctuary. Rachel also understood the profound meaning of that offer. It wasn't just a room being offered. It was a part of Henry's past that he was finally ready to transform into future. "Can we think about it?" asked Rachel, not out of hesitation, but out of respect for the magnitude of the moment. "Of course," responded Henry, leaning back. "Take the time you need." Later that night in the guest house, Rachel found Amy sitting on the veranda, looking at the lights of the main house that shone softly in the darkness. "What do you think of Henry's proposal?" she asked, sitting beside her daughter. Amy reflected for a moment. "I think he's been alone for a long time, Mum, and I think we were too." The wisdom of that child never ceased to surprise Rachel. "You're right. We were. So why not?" The girl turned to face her. "You like him, don't you?" Rachel felt her face warm. "Amy, it's not that simple." "Why not? You're adults. You can decide what you want." "There are many considerations, daughter. Social differences, what people will think, how this would affect her future if it doesn't work out." Amy shrugged. "When you got sick, nobody cared about considerations. Henry helped because it was the right thing to do. Now helping him not be so alone is also the right thing." Rachel hugged her daughter, marveling at her moral clarity. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from you, Mom," responded Amy, nestling into the embrace. "You always said we should return the good we receive." The next morning, Rachel found Henry in his office reviewing some documents. He raised his eyes when she softly knocked on the partially open door. "May I come in?" "Of course," he responded, standing to receive her. Rachel took a deep breath. "About your proposal, and we accept, with one condition." Henry raised his eyebrows, waiting. "That this isn't just an arrangement of convenience or gratitude, that it be a genuine choice from both sides based on—" She hesitated, searching for the right word. "On affection." The smile that illuminated Henry's face was like the sunrise after a long night, gradual, warm, transformative. "Rachel," he said, approaching cautiously, "nothing I've offered to you or Amy has ever been out of convenience or obligation. It was always by choice, out of affection, out of—" It was his turn to hesitate. "Out of something that was dormant in me for so long that I almost forgot how to name it." Rachel felt tears forming, but they weren't tears of sadness or fear, like so many she had shed over the years. They were tears of recognition, of finding finally a safe harbor after a long storm. "Then," she said, her voice firm despite the emotion, "it seems we have a move to organize." Henry extended his hand, and Rachel accepted it. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture, but a simple and powerful symbol of a new beginning, a step towards a future that neither could have imagined when their paths crossed on that rainy afternoon. Autumn arrived in Los Angeles, with its typical alternation between sunny days and sudden rains. The trees in the garden of the Montgomery mansion displayed leaves in golden and red tones, creating a natural carpet that John collected every morning with dedication. 6 months had passed since Rachel and Amy had moved to the main house, and the transformation was evident not only in the physical space, but in the atmosphere that now permeated every corner of that place. The room that had once belonged to Lucy was now Amy's territory. The walls, previously covered with posters of teenage bands, now displayed colorful drawings and certificates of participation in school exhibitions. The shelf that had housed stuffed animals still maintained some of them. Amy had insisted on preserving some of Lucy's mementos, so she knows she hasn't been forgotten, but now shared space with books on art, sciences, and adventure stories. Henry observed these changes with a mixture of nostalgia and gratitude. The past hadn't been erased, just transformed into part of a broader, richer present. Just as the pain hadn't completely disappeared, but had learned to coexist with new joys. "What are you thinking about?" Rachel's voice brought him back to the present moment. She approached with 2 cups of coffee, handing him one as she sat beside him on the veranda. "About how everything has changed," he responded, accepting the coffee. "For the better." Rachel smiled. She too had changed. The fragile and sick woman of 6 months ago had given way to a Rachel full of energy and confidence. As housekeeper, she had earned the respect of all the staff with her combination of efficiency and empathy. As a woman, she rediscovered parts of herself that years of struggle for survival had suffocated. Her taste for music, her ability, with plants, her capacity to dream beyond the next day. "Amy is anxious about today," commented Rachel. "She barely slept last night." "It's a big day for her," agreed Henry. "First official exhibition." The children's art exhibition at the Cultural Center had selected one of Amy's drawings for display. Among hundreds of works from schools throughout the city, hers had been chosen not only to be exhibited, but to illustrate the event's poster. It was an honor that had left the girl bouncing with excitement for weeks. "I still can't believe she kept the drawing a secret until the final selection," said Rachel, shaking her head with a smile. "That daughter of mine can be more reserved than you when she wants to be." Henry laughed. It was true. Amy had worked on her special project with a silent determination, refusing to show the finished work until it was officially selected. "I don't want to create expectations," she had explained seriously when questioned. Only her art teacher knew the complete work before the judging committee. "Have you chosen what you're going to wear?" asked Henry, checking his watch. They still had a few hours before the opening ceremony. "Yes, that blue dress we bought last month." Rachel hesitated for a moment. "Henry, there's something I need to tell you." The tone of her voice made him turn to face her with attention. "I received news from Carl." Henry felt an immediate tension. "Is he breaking the agreement?" No, it's not that," Rachel hastened to clarify. "In fact, he's going away. For good." "How so?" "Apparently, he used the money to pay off debts and buy a stake in a restaurant in the Northeast. Boston, to be exact." Rachel took a sip of coffee. "He sent a letter to Dr. Beatrice, who forwarded it to me. He said he's starting a new life and that he wishes the best for Amy." Henry absorbed the information with caution. "Do you believe him?" "I don't know," admitted Rachel. "Carl was always good with words, but the physical distance and the fact that he has an established business in another state are concrete guarantees. Dr. Beatrice thinks it's genuine. How do you feel about that?" Rachel reflected for a moment. Relieved mainly for Amy. She deserves to grow up without that constant shadow. Henry nodded, understanding. "Will you tell her?" "Eventually. Not today. Today is her day, her achievement. I don't want to mix issues." The sound of quick footsteps interrupted the conversation. Amy appeared on the veranda, still in pajamas, her curly hair disheveled from sleep, but her eyes shining with excitement. "Good morning," she exclaimed, hugging her mother and then Henry. These gestures of affection, once rare, now formed a natural part of their routine. "Is it almost time?" "We still have a few hours, artist," responded Henry, checking his watch. "Enough time for a hearty breakfast and for you to get ready calmly." "I'm so nervous," confessed Amy, sitting between them. "What if people don't like my drawing?" "Art isn't about pleasing everyone," responded Henry. "Here it's about expressing something true for you. Besides that," added Rachel, "your work has already been selected among hundreds. That in itself is a great achievement." Amy smiled, comforted. "You know what I'm happiest about, that you two will be there, together." The comment, apparently simple, carried a profound meaning that didn't go unnoticed by Rachel and Henry. They exchanged a look over the girl's head, one of those looks that had become frequent between them, full of mutual understanding and feelings still being explored. Their relationship had evolved gradually over the past months. It began with long conversations after Amy went to sleep, about books, music, old dreams, fears. Then came the small gestures, a touch of hands, while passing the salt during dinner, a prolonged look when crossing in the corridor, a silent partnership in daily decisions. There was no rush, no pressure. Both carried scars that needed time to completely heal. The Cultural Center was packed when they arrived. Parents, teachers, local authorities, and art lovers circulated through the galleries, admiring the children's works exhibited with the same respect, dedicated to established artists. Amy, dressed in a yellow dress that accentuated her skin tone, and a ribbon that tried, without much success, to tame her rebellious curls, firmly held Rachel and Henry's hands as they walked to the section where her drawing was exhibited. "There," she exclaimed, pointing to a small crowd gathered around one of the walls. It was the same drawing that illustrated the posters and catalogues of the exhibition, a vibrant scene showing three figures holding hands, a tall man, a curly-haired woman and a small girl, standing before a huge, colourful garage full of cars of various sizes and colours. Above, in carefully drawn childish letters, it read, "My new family and their giant toys." The technique was impressive for an 8-year-old child, the proportions, the colours, the details of the vehicles. But what really captured attention was the evident emotion in the work. The three human figures had expressions of simple and genuine happiness, their bodies slightly inclined towards each other in body language that communicated belonging. Henry felt a knot in his throat. Rachel squeezed his hand, equally moved. "Did you like it?" asked Amy, looking up with expectation. "It's perfect," responded Henry, his voice slightly choked. "It's our story," completed Rachel, bending down to hug her daughter. The art teacher approached, smiling. "Amy has a rare gift, not just technical but emotional. She captures the essence of moments." "Thank you, teacher," Amy smiled, proud. "I'll leave you to admire the exhibition," continued the teacher. "Oh, by the way, we've already received 2 offers to buy the original drawing." I explained that it's not for sale. When the teacher moved away, Amy looked at Henry and Rachel with seriousness. "I would never sell this drawing. It's the most important one I've ever made." The official opening ceremony featured speeches, from authorities and the delivery of certificates to the selected young artists. Amy climbed to the small stage with confidence, accepted her certificate, and thanked briefly as she had rehearsed. When she came down, she was received by warm applause, the most enthusiastic coming from the corner where Rachel and Henry observed with evident pride. The rest of the afternoon was dedicated to touring the exhibition, admiring the works of other children, and talking with teachers and organizers who showed themselves genuinely impressed with Amy's talent. The girl absorbed each compliment and constructive criticism with the same serious attention, occasionally making notes in a small notebook she carried for future ideas. On the way back home, Amy fell asleep in the back seat of the car, exhausted by the emotion of the day. Rachel adjusted the jacket over her like a small blanket and returned to sitting in the passenger seat. "She's incredible," commented Henry, keeping his voice low so as not to wake the girl. "She is," agreed Rachel, looking back with a soft smile. "She always has been, but now she has the chance to really flourish." They traveled in comfortable silence for a few minutes, each absorbed in their own thoughts. When they reached a red light, Henry turned to Rachel. "You know what impressed me most about her drawing?" "What?" "That she sees us as a family." He paused. "Is that how you see us too?" Rachel felt her heart accelerate. It was the first time the word family had been mentioned so directly between them. "Yes," she responded with simplicity. "That's how I see us." The light turned green, but Henry didn't move the car immediately. Instead, he extended his hand to touch Rachel's face in a gesture so gentle that it seemed almost reverent. "Me too," he finally said, before turning his attention back to the road. When they arrived at the mansion, Amy was still deeply asleep. Henry carried her in his arms to her room, while Rachel went ahead to open doors and move blankets. They worked in silent harmony, like a long-established team. After accommodating the girl and ensuring she was comfortable, they left the room, on tiptoe. In the corridor, Rachel suddenly stopped. "Henry," he turned, a silent question in his gaze. "Amy's drawing. My new family and their giant toys. She's right. We are a family now, aren't we?" Henry took a step in her direction. "We are what we want to be, Rachel. Without pressure, without imposed expectations, just what we feel is right." "And what do you feel is right?" It was his turn to reflect before responding. "I feel that I spent years accumulating cars, properties, companies, thinking that would fill the void. But nothing worked." He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. "Until a soaked girl appeared in my garage offering to wash 50 cars for a plate of food, and brought with her something that no money can buy." "What?" asked Rachel, though she already knew the answer. "A second chance to start over, to learn to love again. The word love hung between them, laden with meaning. Rachel took a step forward, eliminating the distance. Amy always knew, didn't she? From the beginning, that we belonged here. She saw what we still couldn't see, agreed Henry. Children have that clarity that we lose with age. Rachel smiled. Then perhaps we should learn from her. See things more simply. Like what? Like the fact that I want to kiss you now. The direct declaration, so characteristic of the honesty that defined Rachel, caught Henry by surprise, but only for a moment. In the next, he leaned in slowly, giving her time to reconsider. She didn't reconsider. The kiss was soft, almost hesitant, like a first step on a new path, but one promised for a long time. When they separated, both were smiling. It wasn't an ending, not even a beginning. It was just another moment in a journey that would continue to unfold, day by day, with its joys and challenges, its discoveries and learnings. In the months that followed, the Montgomery mansion witnessed many changes. Henry finally began to use his cars again, not as status symbols but as vehicles for family adventures. Weekend trips to historic towns in California, picnics at hidden waterfalls, visits to museums and parks. Amy continued to surprise everyone with her artistic talent, gaining more recognition in exhibitions and contests. Her goal of becoming her doctor remained, but now she talked about being a doctor who also makes art, a combination that Henry and Rachel fully encouraged. Rachel expanded her responsibilities beyond the administration of the house. With Henry's support, she resumed her interrupted studies in nursing and began to collaborate with social projects in Westmont, transforming her life experience into support for other families in vulnerable situations. As for Henry, the deepest transformation was internal. The man who had once lived surrounded by luxury but empty of purpose now found meaning in the simplest things, in Amy's morning smile, in Rachel's gentle touch before sleeping, in the small routines they built together. One night, almost as year after Amy's arrival at his garage, Henry found himself again before his silver Porsche, the first luxury car he had bought, symbol of his initial success. But now he didn't observe it with empty nostalgia. He passed a soft cloth over the bodywork, preparing it for a special trip the next day. "Need help?" Amy's voice echoed in the garage. She approached, already in pajamas, her hair damp from the bath. "I thought you were already asleep," commented Henry, smiling at her. "I wanted to say good night to you." The girl approached, observing the car with admiration. "Are we really going to the beach tomorrow?" "Yes, everything is prepared. Your mother has already packed the bags." Amy smiled, excited at the prospect of the first beach trip of her life. Then her gaze became more serious. "You know, that day I came here for the first time, I was very afraid." "You were?" Henry stopped what he was doing, giving her his full attention. "You didn't seem to be." "I know how to hide it well," she admitted with a small smile. "But I was terrified. Mom was so sick we had no money, and I heard stories about a rich man who had 50 cars that nobody ever saw." "And yet you came." Amy nodded. "I had no choice. Or rather, my only choice was to try. Mom always said that trying and failing is better than never trying." "Your mother is a wise woman." "Yes." Amy ran her fingers over the shiny hood of the Porsche. "But you know what's funny? I came here to wash your cars and earn food, and I ended up gaining a family." Henry felt his chest tighten with emotion. He bent down to be at her height. "Amy, I'm the one who gained a family. You and your mother gave me something I thought I would never have again." The girl hugged him spontaneously, a gesture that still surprised him with its sincerity. "Can we take the Porsche tomorrow?" she asked against his shoulder. "It's my favorite." Henry laughed. "Of course we can. I'm preparing it especially for that." "Great." She moved away, excited. "I'll go to sleep now. Tomorrow we need to leave. Early." "Good night, little artist." "Good night, Dad." It was the first time she had called him that. The title came naturally, without ceremony or hesitation, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Henry remained motionless, absorbing The impact of that small word loaded with so much meaning. When he managed to compose himself, Amy had already disappeared up the stairs. In the silence of the garage, among his 50 cars that had once been his only pride, Henry Montgomery allowed himself to cry. Not tears of loss or regret, but of pure gratitude. That night when he joined Rachel in bed, he told her about the moment with Amy. "She called me Dad," he said, still amazed. Rachel smiled, not surprised. "She's been rehearsing for weeks. She asked if I thought you would be happy or sad." "And what did you say?" "That you would be emotional, but definitely happy." She paused. "Was I right?" Henry pulled her closer. "More than you can imagine." The next morning, the silver Porsche left the gates of the Montgomery mansion with 3 smiling occupants: a man who rediscovered purpose, a woman who never lost hope, and a girl who, with courage and determination, transformed 50 cars into a family. And as the road unfolded ahead, taking them to new adventures and horizons, Henry couldn't help but think about how sometimes it's the losses that prepare us for the greatest gains, and how destiny has surprising ways of leading us exactly to where we need to be.